Hello, welcome back. In this video, you will learn about scrapy pipelines, how to make one yourself, and how to use them. But first, let's start with what they can be used for. So scrapy itself has some pretty good documentation about pipelines, so I encourage you to use them if this video is confusing or you still have questions after it. You don't have to remember this URL, you can just Google scrapy item pipeline and this page should pop right up. So here, as you can see in their documentation, they give some examples of what to use pipelines for. So some of them are to clean your scraped items, to validate them, to check for duplicates, or to store your scraped items in a database. Let's see, in the City Bureau project, we have some pipelines as well. So here I'm at the City Bureau GitHub repo. I'm going to go into our pipelines folder. Okay, we have a couple of pipelines, a logging pipeline, which is pretty simple, and I'll show you that later, a validation pipeline to validate our scraped data, an Airtable pipeline to write each item into Airtable, which is where we're keeping the data right now, a geocoding pipeline, which takes in the addresses from each item and spits out latitude, longitude, and then a SQL alchemy pipeline, but I think this isn't written out. Okay, so I'll start with showing you a big picture overview of what's going on with a pipeline. Let me just try this. Nope. Okay, great. So if you've seen the other videos, this should be pretty familiar. We say scrapy crawl trischool actions in the terminal, and this makes an HTTP request out to the internet, to this URL. It brings back a response object, and then this project, we're writing code, we're writing parse functions to turn this response object into this well-structured scraped items data. So each of these items is a dictionary or JSON object, and here I'm showing 3 of them. So a pipeline is optional, but once you have one, what it does is it takes each of these scraped items and passes it through the pipeline. So something like this, showing that each item goes through the pipeline one at a time, not as a batch, one at a time, and it gets processed. So this green processed means something like this item got written to a database, or it got validated, or it got geocoded. Okay. So let's see how that looks in the code. Okay, so let me show you this logging pipeline that we have. So to make your own pipeline, all you have to do is create your own class, your own pipeline class. So here we have a documenters aggregator logging pipeline class. That's quite a mouthful. And all you have to do to make it a pipeline is to have a method called process item with the signature, self item and spider. And what scrapy knows is after it gets all of the scraped items, to pass each item through this process item function. So for example, for this one, it's pretty simple. All it's going to do is spit out some warnings from the spider and then return the item as is. So don't do anything to that item. If you're writing your own pipeline, one thing you have to know is you have to register that pipeline. So in our pipelines folder, we have an init.py. And as you can see, we've registered all of our pipelines here. So if you're adding a pipeline to ours, which we would encourage you to do, you have to import it and then add it at the bottom here, the name of the class. Okay, so that's registering. And then in order to use it, you have to do one more thing. You have to turn it on. And so that's in our settings file. So settings.py here. You can see we have a lot of settings. One of them is item pipelines, and so here you can see it's commented out, but we used to have running a validation pipeline, and then this number 300. So the number here is to keep track of the order if you have more than one pipeline. So actually here I could have put validation pipeline 300, geocoding pipeline 400, and since 300 is smaller than 400, the validation pipeline would run first. Okay, so that's how it looks in the code. Now let me show you it running in action. Okay, So this is Sublime Text, a text editor. I have the settings.py file. This is a local copy of the repo. And here, instead of the validation pipeline, I'm turning on that documenters aggregator logging pipeline. To remind you, it's a very simple pipeline. All it does is spit out a warning from the spider and do nothing to the item. Okay, so now I'm here in the terminal. I'm going to do this time scrapy crawl tri-school actions. Okay, great. Let's look at this output, starting at the top. Okay, so scrapy crawl tri-school actions. You can see here's some information from the settings that we had, and then information about middlewares. And here you can see in this line, enabled item pipelines, and then this pipeline we had enabled. The spider opens and starts crawling. And you can see here, our pipeline is taking effect. It's spitting out that warning from the spider. And then here's just returning the item as is. So that's the first item. The second item, spitting out the warning, and then the item as is. Warning, item, all the way to the bottom. So that's pretty much it.